What's up, readers? My name is Adam, aka A Dude Who Reads, and I want to talk to you today about the book that changed my mind about the Dresden Files. And the reason I want to have this conversation with you is because this was not book one, this was not book two, this was not book three, or even book four, or even book five. No, the book that changed my mind about the Dresden Files happened to be the 12th book in the series, Changes. Now, that is absolutely bonkers to me because it's not often that you get 12 books deep into a series and have your entire perspective on that series be changed, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what my thoughts were prior to reading Changes and how Changes has kind of flipped my whole thinking about this series on its head. Starting off with, let's talk about how I feel about the Dresden Files as a series. So I started reading the Dresden Files about a year ago, and I've read the books relatively quickly because they're quick reads, they're easy reads, they're fun reads, right? And one of the things that you will often hear when you hear people who are fans of the Dresden Files talk about the series is really you have to get to about book 3 or 4 before you can really make a decision whether you like the series or not, because at around books 3 and 4 the tone of the series changes. And I completely understand where they're coming from, because really what happens when you get to book 3 or 4 is the series itself almost changes genres. So the first couple books in the Dresden Files series, really, they're kind of noir private eye style books with a layer of magic on top of them. So they kind of feel like old school pulp novels. That's kind of the feel that I got for the first few Dresden Files novels. Now, they're not bad. I actually kind of enjoyed them, like I said, as sort of a fun, easy read. No one's ever accused old school pulp novels of being high literature, right? The reason you read them is because they're a nice escape from reality and they're just fun reads. And that's kind of how I approached the Dresden Files. Now, around the fourth book, you get a little bit of a shift in tone, and the books do become more, quote unquote, fantasy. What I mean by that is the focus of the books moves away from sort of that private eye noir feel that you have in the first few books, and you move towards kind of tropes and plot lines that are more familiar to modern fantasy readers, even though this is an urban fantasy book and not sort of a classic fantasy book or an epic fantasy book like some of the more popular fantasy series out there right now. And so that is the point at which a lot of Dresden Files fans will say, okay, if you've made it past the fourth book and now you're enjoying it, now this is the point at which you become a Dresden Files superfan. Except that didn't happen for me. I didn't dislike the series after the fourth book, but I also didn't become a Dresden Files superfan. If anything, at some point after I got past that fourth, fifth book, it got to a point where I was reading these books and I was like, okay, I like these books enough that I can read them or, sometimes listen to them on audiobook and be entertained by them. But at no point at any point of reading these was I ever thinking these books are going to make my best books of all time list of anything, right? Top fantasy, top urban fantasy. I probably couldn't make a top urban fantasy list. I haven't read enough. But bottom line is they were enjoyable, but I never thought of them as great books. And the reason for that is quite simply that the Dresden Files always kind of felt to me like, and I've said this before, they felt like a guilty pleasure. It kind of felt like reading a mainstream superhero comic book in prose format. There is nothing particularly special or mind blowing about those types of books, other than that they're enjoyable to read. And there's some action, and there's some witty remarks, and there's some interesting characters, and they do things that can be described as cool, but they're not great books by any stretch of the imagination. So then I'm reading these, and I keep reading them because I have fun reading them. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to be clear about this. I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong about reading books for the pure enjoyment of reading them without having to believe that they are fantastic writing. I was just continuing to read the Dresden Files at the clip of probably about one book a month, one book every 6 weeks, something like that. Just because, like I said, they're easy reads. About half the books I listen to on audiobook too, so you don't even realize you're reading these books, right? I just kind of enjoyed it. I was going along. And then in January, I got to book 12, Changes, and Changes is probably the most apropos title of any book I have read in a really long time. In this book, this is a spoiler-free video, so I'm not going to go into the details of what happened in this book. But literally, all of the things that annoyed me about the previous 11 books, we would sort of get repetitive descriptions of the same things over and over again. Things would just not really change. You get character descriptions that came back over and over again. The same sort of character traits would keep getting repeated. And so, at some point, I'm like, it's book 11. The only person reading book 11 is someone who's already read the other 10 books. You don't need to describe the Blue Beetle to me for the 11th time. I get it. The Blue Beetle is Harry's car, which used to be blue but isn't blue anymore. By the time you get to Changes, though, literally everything changes because Changes blows everything up. And I think what I really appreciate about this book is that it is not just the author's willingness to change things up completely, but also the fact that this isn't something that was a spur of the moment decision. It's not like Jim Butcher woke up one morning and was like, you know what, I'm getting tired of writing these books the way I was writing them for the first 11 volumes, so let me just blow everything up in book 12 and change everything. Clearly he didn't do this. And the reason I know he didn't do this, or at least the reason I'm pretty sure he didn't do this, is that if you go back through the previous 11 books, there are things that happen as far back as, I want to say, books 3 or 4 that were foreshadowing stuff that happened in this book. So scenes that I thought were just completely gratuitous, kind of, why is this even in here? I really don't want to be reading this, has a very legitimate reason for being in the story, and there is a plot device that pays off 12 books into the series. Now, the series is supposed to go on for 24 books, which means that by the time I've gotten to Changes, I have read half the series. And so half this series has gone by, and at the halfway point is the point at which I have now decided, you know what, this isn't just a guilty pleasure anymore. This is a series that I'm really, really enjoying, and I really want to read the rest of this. And to me, there's something incredibly special about the fact that an author can be like, if you hang around with me this long and I'm entertaining enough to at least get you this far along, and then 12 books into a series, I'm going to do something that is going to blow your mind. What Changes did in terms of elevating the story to the next level is really surprising. The other thing that happens in Changes, which I think is far and above, way better than anything else I've seen Butcher do, is kind of the stakes and the impact on Harry Dresden's character. So whereas, like I said, some of my challenges with the first 11 books is like things go bad, but then things go back to normal. After Changes, nothing is going back to normal. It can't go back to normal. If Butcher finds a way to make things go back to normal, I'm making another video like this in a couple months' time talking about the second book that completely reversed the way I feel about the Dresden Files. But I somehow don't think that's going to happen. The impacts of the events that happen in this book, for the first time in the entire series, I feel like changed our protagonist. I feel like there was a real impact to who Harry Dresden is as a person, and you can feel it. It is the first time I feel some sort of emotional resonance from this book, which is not something that I typically get from the Dresden Files. Like I said, you read the Dresden Files for some cool stuff that happens, some action-packed plots, some interesting plot twists. It's never for the, emotional gut punch that you're reading this. But in Changes, you actually do feel some of Harry's pain, and you feel like, okay, this time around, Butcher has put this poor guy through so much hell, and now he's got to come out the other side. I actually do feel for him. And so, yet another reason why, to me, Changes kind of took this entire series from kind of a coasting, decent, okay series to me, to being something that is something I really want to follow. And if there's any hope of keeping this level of excellence up for the rest of this series, to me, the Dresden Files, I can now start to understand why so many people feel like this is an all-time great series. I didn't for the first 11 books. For the first 11 books, I was just kind of along for the ride and I was kind of having fun. Now I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty awesome. Let's see how it continues from here. Can Butcher keep it up? I have no idea. If you've read the rest of the books, don't spoil it for me, but let me know if you think Changes was a turning point for the series in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with my take on this. Let me know if you disagree with my take on this. Basically, just give me your thoughts. Just please don't wreck the rest of the series for me, all right? Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.